As always, a few housekeeping items for any SAG members or members of the public who park downstairs. Please get validated before the end of the meeting so that you don't get stuck downstairs. Like 3 weeks ago, for several of us, we were stuck downstairs for quite a while. So take your time in the middle of whether it's public comment or in between a break or one of the presentations to just make sure you get validated. Welcome to our third meeting together. Thank you for being here, everyone. Especially Jim Goddard, whose San Jose Sharks are like warming up on the ice right now for a playoff game. Yeah. But you might get called upon during a power play or something. We don't know. So more housekeeping. I've done a pretty bad job of just introducing the team over the last several meetings. So I just want to do kind of a quick round of introductions. I'm just going to ask them to stand and wave. Most of them are behind you. And as we start to flow into some of the solution groups, some of the regional and citywide meetings, you're going to see more of these faces. And so I just want to do that. I think all of you know Kim Wallish, Deputy City Manager, Director of Economic Development, Lauren Haley, who is one of our project managers in Economic Development in Google, Dave Javid from Plan to Place, who I think most of you know, as well as Leah Chambers from Plan to Place, who's new to this process, but you're going to be seeing a lot of her. And then Matt Ramey from Ramey Associates, as well as Kim Dorman from Ramey and Associates. And then there's several staff, or I don't know, several, because there is a playoff games, but Nancy Klein in the office, as well as Bill Eckern, who is a season ticket holder to the Sharks and not here right now. But you're going to be meeting him during the walking tours. So you'll be seeing these faces, throughout the rest of the process, and I'll try and do a better job of reminding you who they are and when they'll be here. Last but not least, can I get a quick approval for the minutes? Second? Okay.
Motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
Okay, all in favor? Okay. All right, thank you very much. So I'm going to bring up Dave. We've got a great meeting where we finally, as a city, kind of get to join in on the listening part of the process, which we're really excited about. So I'll hand it over to Dave to walk us through.
Thank you very much, Lee. Great to see you all again. Thank you for being here. So real quickly, I want to walk us through the agenda for tonight. Obviously, welcome introductions. We're there now. We're going to have a quick overview of the SOG notes from the last meeting just to make sure that we got it correct. If there's anything that was missing, we could talk about it then. You'll notice that we moved public comment up on the list tonight so that we can hear from folks in the public. We heard from people throughout the last couple SOG meetings that they wanted a chance to talk early in the process, so we're allowing that to happen here tonight, and for those that want to get to the Sharks game to be able to do that as well. The solution groups and walking tours, we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about those solution groups, where you're signed up. You all received an email about that. We'll talk a bit about that, the timing of those solution groups, who will be facilitating those from our team, as well as any questions or further questions you might have about those. And then we're going to also give you some dates on the walking tours, which we got finalized recently. We're going to have folks from the city and members of the SOG presenting an update on the transportation components that are happening in and around the Dearborn Station. And then the most exciting part, we're going to get to hear from you all during these TED Talks. We have 4-minute TED Talks planned. There's 5 people signed up today. And about 13 in the next meeting. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but this is your chance to let us know what your ideas and vision is for the area, and then we could have a conversation around that, leading to the solution groups. And then we'll talk through the next steps in meeting schedule coming up. So as we do at every meeting, the SOG group agreements, you all have been excellent about this, but just as a reminder, that we all respect each other here, one voice, we don't interrupt each other, and we get through this process as smoothly and efficiently as possible. And again, you all have been great about this, so I don't think it's going to be an issue. And I always like to mention have fun and make new friends, because I think that's the most important part of these meetings. So the meeting minutes from, or the meeting notes, from the last meeting, we talked a lot about what Google presented. Folks from Google that were here, the representatives here that talked about their design principles and what inspired them. we heard a lot of good feedback from you all and from the public that they really appreciated the genuine approach. They appreciated the focus on environmental and the nature components, on the environmental components. A People First project, people saw that really highlighted in that presentation. And then we heard a lot about wanting to make this project distinct, making it a world-class development, ensuring that employment growth doesn't also come with potential impacts to traffic and other environmental impacts, holistic perspectives. So this just kind of captures some of that input that we received from you all, and that was all included in those summary notes that are now up on the website as well. We also asked to get some additional input about the data that we provided so far, the information we provided. Obviously, that's going to be an ongoing, continual process. As we gather data internally, we'll be sharing that with you all, and that'll feed directly into the solution group process. This was some of the input we got from you all, was to concerned about the radius that we were using, so we'll take another look at that and make sure we have that correct in terms of how much we capture, how much area we capture. Folks mentioned that maybe looking at a half mile versus only a quarter mile might be more relevant to kind of pick up that 10-mile or 10-minute walk radius. And then we got a few other input points here as well that, again, we're looking at internally and we'll consider moving forward. And then other data requests included looking at data on homeless encampments, looking at the SNAP program for students and trying to integrate as much about that we can. Some of this information is going to be difficult to find, and we'll probably work with you all that maybe suggested where some of those data points might be to help gather those as we move into the solution group process. You'll see a few other suggestions here as well as to other data requests that you all made at the last meeting. So I think that's all I had. Was there any, I moved through that fairly quickly, but any questions or anything that was maybe missed from that last meeting that we didn't capture correctly you all want to talk about now? No? All right, great. So with that, again, we're doing this a little bit differently tonight. With that, we're going to open it up to the public and allow for some public comment to start off the meeting. We have a few comment cards here. And if you didn't get a chance to fill out a comment card, please do. But I'll go ahead and call your name, and you could step up to this mic that I'll put down here for you, and we get started. So Gail Osmer.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. Thank you for putting public comment in front. Anyway, I'm Gail Osmer, and I'm a homeless advocate. And I saw on here you talked about homeless encampments. May I ask if anybody in this room, if you could raise your hand, how many of you have been to a homeless encampment and talked to the homeless and walked with them? Okay, so that's pretty good. Okay, thank you. I'm here because I want to make sure the homeless, as they do once a week, they displace and they sweep 19 to 20 homeless camps a week. That's thousands and thousands of dollars we're spending needlessly. I want to make sure when this whole project comes that most of the homeless or all the homeless aren't being displaced as they are being displaced now. You can go anywhere in San Jose, and unfortunately we have homeless sleeping in doorways, down in the creeks, people's property, because there's no affordable or low income, I should say low income housing for homeless people. Most of the housing that's coming in is going to come in 5 years or 6 years. Please, let's think about the homeless when you're walking and doing your tours. And please, let's not displace them because they're being displaced every single day and there's no place for them to go. They have to just move to a different place and then come back to the places where they've been displaced. So thank you.
Thank you, Gail. Next up is Sandy Perry.
Good evening. I'm Sandy Perry from Affordable Housing Network.
Thank you.
And We just went through a rather long, lengthy city council meeting last Tuesday where we had hundreds of renters testifying about the conditions that they're facing in this city and the hardships that they're facing. And one of the big issues was displacement. The city is rewriting its Ellis Act ordinance. And one of the things that came out in there is the city cannot write an ordinance which is going to prevent displacement. It's just not strong enough without running into problems with the incentives which developers need for building projects. So that's the dilemma that the city's in. So what they're saying is that this displacement is going to go on and on and on. And I personally, from the discussions that I've heard, the discussions that I've seen of this entire Google project, the displacement issue is simply not being taken seriously enough. When the Mountain View housing debate took place last year, there was a discussion, and some of the figures that came out says that that it's one new home is required to offset the impact of each 1.4 new jobs created. Based on that projection, the San Jose Google project can be expected to create additional demand for 14,286 housing units, in addition to our 35,000 that we already have as a REMA goal in the city. And you know, this just isn't working. We have to address those numbers if we're going to have a viable project. Thank you.
All right, last up we have Brian Grayson.
Hi, Brian Grayson, Preservation Action Council. Although my comments tonight aren't specific to preservation, it's more on the process and the organization of the committee. You're kind of a hybrid. You're not really a commission. You're not really a public body in the sense of you're not holding hearings, but you're a public meeting. And I would suggest that you put the public testimony at the beginning, or the public forum at the beginning, but that serves one purpose, it defeats another, and it doesn't allow for an opportunity to discuss the agenda items as you go through them. And I would ask that you look at perhaps incorporating, you can leave public input at this point, but also look at the opportunities for public input specific to the areas that you're discussing after each item or before each item, so that there's an opportunity to actually address the items on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. I got a few more here. I'm going to ask a couple people to, or just so you know when you're coming up in line. Next up, we have Larry Ames, and then Christian Oland, and then Sharon Marfil.
Yes, I'll echo his comments. I usually give comments at the end of the meeting to address issues raised during the meeting, so it's a little hard to talk at the beginning. I view Google not as a danger to something to fear, but as an opportunity to improve the area and to benefit the region. I'm excited that Google will use and enhance the rails and the trails in the area to provide access to it. It'll add to San Jose's budget, and the dollars will help benefit all of the community. And I'm hoping that they will not be an isolated enclave, but will mesh into the fabric of the city and to be environmentally enhance the area and make it a vibrant attraction. I wish I could comment at the end, because then I have specific comments, so these are just general wishes. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I want to remind everyone there's also comment cards in the back of the agenda, so you could definitely leave additional comments, leave a comment box at the end. Next up is Larry. Oh, Christian, I'm sorry. Did I get your name right? No, that was Larry.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Christian Olano, organizer with PACT. I want to echo what Sandy Perry said regarding the inherent displacement effects that will happen, and to really have a robust analysis on potential displacement effects that will happen because of this project, and to look at the scope beyond a half-mile radius or a mile radius, but again, to reaffirm that this is going to have a regional impact, so not to undermine that aspect. And to really look, in reference to what happened last week with the Ellis Act, if there's any way with such a large project to incorporate some sort of policy that can mitigate displacement to some extent that's unique to this project, since it's going to have a big impact. Perhaps it's looking at protecting or providing funding for rehabilitation of apartment rent ordinance units within a 2-mile radius of this area, or something along those lines within certain boundaries. I think that could be very helpful for the preservation of affordable housing stock that exists here. In addition to that, being really genuine with intentionality around integrated housing, and this could be a project that could give some hope to integrated housing in terms of race, but also in terms of different income levels, perhaps even in the same complex, in the same building. So any policies that can be geared around that would be really, really helpful. And again, I was here at the first meeting, not to undermine, but to also look at the historical analysis around race, redlining, racial covenants that do exist in this downtown area. That did exist. And finally, encouraging a robust community engagement process within not just the downtown area, but within all areas of San Jose, particularly in the east side. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up is Sharon Martfill and then Ben Vo.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Sharon Mafil. I am a student currently at De Anza, and I'm also an intern for VITA and Renters' Rights. I guess my comment is kind of personalize this for each and one of you guys. When are we going to take notice in the issues that impact our people until it personally affects you, right? So imagine just traffic, displacement, even your families might get displaced, and we really don't start caring until it actually happens to each and one of you. So just take that into consideration, and also as well as De Anza students that commute from San Jose to Cupertino. I have a friend of mine that actually is homeless, and De Anza has actually a pretty high percentage of homelessness on campus. And there's been already some things that have been put in place for those homeless students to be able to shower on campus, but still that's not yet enough. And with Google moving in and this whole more tech companies moving in, it just gives it a more justifiable reason for other tech companies to move in as well. So I think it's just for our choice as the community and as the people in power and the ones that have a voice to actually represent these communities that don't have that voice, and to actually just think of, well, how impacting this can be to people, even as students, families, mothers, children who are moving away from San Jose. I know for me personally, I live in San Jose, but there's always that question whether I'm gonna end up living here on my own. Will I have to still depend on my parents? And of course, as a college student, you really don't wanna think about those things. But unfortunately, in San Jose, I have to worry about that each day as I come closer to moving out. So just please take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. We have Ben Vo, and then last is Roland Lebrun.
All right. Hello, advisory group. My name is Ben Vo, and I'm also a student at De Anza College. First year, I live in San Jose's District 4. And the mantra of Silicon Valley has always historically been like the saying that we don't look at the past because we're so caught up with the future. And from a political lens, that's always been the modus operandi of San Jose. Ever since the 1940s, San Jose and its business leaders have always been concerned with growth. Land was annexed at massive rates, and much to the delight of developers. San Jose was far more concerned with cooperating with developers than good planning. This was a quote-unquote paradise for developers. Lenient zoning, aggressive annexation, eagerly supplied capital improvements like streets and sewers, and also a sewage monopoly sped up growth. That growth is catching up with us today. The Bay Area is literally running out of land to build on. It makes so much sense for Google to come to San Jose. It's actually in their master corporate plan to build in San Jose. I'm a student, and I think as students, we know that there isn't a future for us here. I have friends who they take out loans to pay rent, and others who sleep in their Priuses, their second row seats folded down to make a makeshift bed. This isn't normal. And I guess what I'm saying is that we, as a community, we have to be specific and also do a lot of community outreach with our demands and community benefits, because history is bound to repeat itself. We can't morally enhance San Jose's image as a major city without protecting its current residents. This can't be business as usual. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Roland?
Thank you. My name is Roland LeBrun. So what I'd like to do is to echo the comments that a couple of people before me made. This group is subject to the Brown Act, and therefore you have to follow government code in terms of how you basically engage the public. So this item number 3 is essentially for general public comment for items which are not on the agenda, and as such you're not really allowed to have any further discussions, but you have the option of agendizing, whatever the committee's concern was at a later date. Now, with regards to the other items, you must hear from the public on each one of these items. You can do it immediately after the presentation, or you can engage into discussion among yourselves after the presentations, and then request from the public if they got any input, and then you can go around and do some further discussion. That's what you want to do. But what I'm saying is that this is not the end of public comment for this meeting today. There must be an opportunity for the public to comment at some point on any of the subsequent agenda items. Thank you.
Okay, and I believe last up is Tessa Wood-Mancy.
Well, okay, so we made this, the last meeting, we call malpractice on the City of San Jose's Planning Department. I don't know if you can see what's happening at Whole Foods there, the white big building that is the, a big, we call it, what is it called, like Soviet Union, Soviet-era mental hospital. There's a big white wall. I know I'm supposed to make this larger if I followed my husband's instruction, but you'll see it in the Whole Foods shopping when you come into Whole Foods. So this is the kind of design that we're getting in San Jose, and it's really a problem. We need an architectural review board. We don't have that. I mean, this is where we get this type of thing, and they say, oh, well, eventually this Whole Foods parking lot will be raised to 7 stories as well. But we need all facades to look good, and this is the type of thing that it's kind of like a disease. We started with the SAP Center being very industrialized with no greenery, then it spread to the Whole Foods, and then now all the buildings on Stockton are very like Soviet-era mental hospitals without much greenery, and it's very bad for our health as well as our property values. So that's an issue, is how do we get an architectural review board that we can all agree upon? Like Roland was saying, we as neighbors should really be able to evaluate the architectural review boards and how they can really integrate. We need more greenery in our community. We have nature deficit disorder. Our buildings and our environments that we're building need to be much more green. And so around the whole thing, like the way Cinnabar Commons, I say that's an example on Stockton, where they have trees on both sides. You want greenery on both sides. You don't want DG, which is that, ground yellow that looks like dog poop on the ground. We want greenery. So anyway, and then, of course, we need I just noticed recently that Julian Street is not wheelchair accessible. There's no way to get down with Julian with the stairs, and there's no bike path. So we need Julian Street to be at least wheelchair accessible, bicycle accessible, and we need that on Stockton Avenue too. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So just in regard to the public comment, I don't believe that we're in violation of the Brown Act by any way you read the code based off of the last meeting with the city attorney's office and how we properly noticed this. Quite honestly, I felt a bit of pressure moving this up on the agenda based off of a lot of conversation that the 39 of us had together, and did say, I think we're going to get some pushback when we do this. I decided to do it because the next agenda item we have, which we're going to talk mostly about the transit station, Caltrain, VTA, the city, high-speed rail are doing considerable amount of public outreach on their own. So we're likely to already capture a lot of the comments on that. So that's why I moved it up on this agenda. But I do think there's a certain valid point of we're going to hear a bunch of ideas here tonight. And that's why I've tried to keep public comment at the end, whether it's you guys presenting or us presenting, that you don't hear public comment that is about generalities, because we're not going to be working in generalities. We're going to be working about, we're going to be working together in specifics and ideas and aspirations. So luckily for tonight, and Dave and I forgot to mention this, and apologize to the public as well, on the TED Talks, we only have 5 tonight. Several of you wish to go, 3 weeks later. I think you guys were afraid like it was the final and dog ate my presentation, I want to go in 3 weeks. So we're going to accommodate that. So we do have a bit of time, which would be great for Sharks fans. Hopefully you can get home and watch the Sharks game. But we will have an opportunity to do public comment that I believe is me facilitating this group. I'm allowed to do. So we will do it again at the end of this meeting so they can react to your own presentations tonight. But moving forward, I am going to keep it at the end because I do really agree with the public comments tonight that it'd be great for them to react to what you guys are talking about and what we're talking about as a group. So moving on to the next item, solution groups and walking tours. So a lot of logistics went into this, and I want to thank Dave, Matt, Kim, and Lauren for handling this while I was out. Thank you very much. And thank you for everyone that signed up. So we've got the 5 solution groups, and the first meeting and the second meeting scheduled for each one. And so I believe this has already gone out in an email to you. We will be doing a reminder at some point this week and the following week to individual groups. All meetings will be here. And so on what we've decided to do and why I introduced folks, so that Lauren and I weren't going to every single one of these meetings and neglecting our families, we're distributing some of the workload just as you guys are as committee members. We're kind of distributing the workload amongst ourselves. So for land use and design, for those of you that are on this group, Matt Ramey is going to be your main facilitator, and you'll be working with him before, during, and after that process. For the parks, public space, sustainability, and neighborhood quality of life, Kim Wallish, Deputy City Manager, will be handling that. For housing, displacement, and gentrification, you're stuck with me. And transportation, access, and traffic will be Lauren Haley. And then on jobs, education, and economic development, it'll be Dave Javid. And so again, you're likely to get another email from us kind of to the whole group with the roster and the meeting dates just as a reminder. But expect emails, like if you are on the housing group, expect to see an email from me in the near term about some of the information requests that we want going into that first meeting. So you're likely to get kind of some specific touches from us as we move forward. And then the other thing we've done between today and our previous meeting is the walking tours. So we told you that we were going to be offering those. Those are voluntary. So Bill Eckern, who's not here for me to introduce you to, but we'll get his mugshot and send it to you so you can recognize him, is going to be available on these 2 dates. For those of you, I think we did this 3 or 4 times in the Good Neighbor Committee. It's really helpful to just get out there and see things. We do have a lot of maps that we'll be sharing during this and kind of showing you where things will be and talking about station footprint and a variety of other things. Bill is extremely knowledgeable about this space. So, he's likely to tell you why the bricks on this one side of the street are a certain color versus the other side. So it's really good just kind of providing context to the area. So we've done it on a Saturday and then on a Wednesday kind of after work to try and accommodate everyone's schedule. And so we'll send out an email reminder as we get closer to these dates. And with that, we're going to move into the Diridon Station Transportation update. I'm going to introduce John Risto, our Deputy Director of Transportation with the city, to start us off.
Thank you, Lee, and I'd like my panel members to come up. The partnership is going to be up here at the front. Good evening, everybody. We're really happy to be here to tell you about all the effort that's going on planning the Diridon Station area. So as soon as my panel gets set, I'm going to get kicked off here. So here we are. We're going to talk about the Diridon Station planning that's going on between the 4 partner agencies. So here at the table with me is the 4 agencies that have formed a partnership for the planning of the Diridon Station. We've got Liz Scanlon from Caltrain. Eric Eidlin from the City of San Jose Department of Transportation, Jill Gibson from VTA, and Kelly Doyle from the High Speed Rail Authority. So very quickly, what you're going to see today, we're going to share with you the efforts that we have going on here at Dearden Station right now. We're going to go into and talk about all of the different projects that are connecting into the station, as well as the international best practices that we actually learned about during last summer's tours. And we're going to go into a little bit of detail about the Dearden Integrated Station Concept Plan, which is the long-winded words about really what the station planning effort's going to look like over the next couple of years. So each one of my panelists is going to cover a part of this. Eric is going to go over and do the station area planning effort, really what this station spatial diagram is going to look like after we get started with a consultant. We're going to have an update on Caltrain electrification and business plan from Liz from Caltrain. Jill is going to tell us all about the great news that we've been getting from our BART system over the last couple of weeks. And then Kelly's going to tell us about the High Speed Rail Authority work. I was going to skip that because you couldn't read it. So why is Dearden Station so important? Really, this really is the only place in the Bay Area that you're going to see all of these different rail systems and transit systems come together. This is it. All of those are going to intersect at Dearden Station. Why is it important? It is going to be an incredible modern intermodal station, and it will be where all of these forms of transportation come together, as well as become really a driver for economic development for both the city and the region as this station transforms to accept and actually expand for the many modes that are going to be coming into this station. I'm going to skip on to the next one. This is where I'm going to turn it over to Jill's going to go first for the BART system.
There. Good afternoon. All right, so quick overview on the VTA's BART Silicon Valley program. It's in total a 16-mile extension. 10 miles is currently under construction. 2 stations that connect to the Warm Springs stations. It's the Milpitas station and the Berryessa North San Jose station. The project cost us around $2.4 billion. The Phase 2 extension, which is really what we're talking about tonight, is a 6-mile extension. 5 miles of that is a single-bore tunnel configuration. It includes 4 stations. 3 of those stations are in a subway configuration. So starting from the east, going west is Alum Rock, 28th Street Station, Downtown Station, the Dearden Station, of course, and then at-grade station next to the existing Caltrain station, and that is at-grade. And it's near our end-of-the-line maintenance facility at New Hall Yard. We anticipate passenger service in 2026, and the project cost is right now is $4.7 billion. And some of the good news John alluded to was we received news that we received our full ask for the TIRSA application from the state last Thursday, so which is $750 million for the program. So the outstanding money still needed is from the federal government, which we're asking $1.5 billion. So schedule, we are wrapping up our environmental clearance phase. VTA board approved the single bore option and certified the final environmental document in early April. The BART board concurred. So now the last major milestone in the environmental phase is the FTA's record of decision. So we need the green light from the federal government before we're able to ask for more federal funds and in advance into engineering. We're anticipating to receive the FFGA, the full funding grant agreement, sometime mid-late 2020, with project construction starting shortly after. And again, passenger service is end of 2026. Liz?
Thank you, Jill. Hi, everybody. Good to be here tonight. So I'm going to give a quick overview of two big initiatives that Caltrain is currently working on, and hopefully many of you are familiar with the first one, which is on the screen, which is our Caltrain Electrification Project, or CalMod, which is short for Caltrain Modernization Program. It's our electrification between our station at Tamian here in San Jose and all the way to San Francisco. What's important about it is it converts our aging, our very, very, very old, aging, tired diesel fleet into electrical multiple, we're called electrical multiple units or electric trains. So 75% of the fleet gets converted in this first part of the project. What that does is allow us to offer faster, more frequent service and start to improve capacity on the Caltrain corridor and retire those old, tired diesels. So we also were the recipient of state funding, which is exciting. We currently, this project is a roughly $2 billion project for the first kind of electrification. The TIRCP grant allows us to do some additional work to lay the foundation. What's important to us is this is a foundation for modernizing the Caltrain corridor. In terms of schedule, we are in construction. There's actually work that will be happening, if it's not already, here in San Jose soon. We hope to get into revenue service in 2022, which would allow the 75% of the fleet to start to get retired, and we'll be running those electric new trains. Kind of our next big initiative is what we're calling the Caltrain business plan, and we call it a business plan because it's two parts. One is a long-range service plan, and one part is kind of looking at our business case around the Caltrain corridor. And really what we want to do is, as I mentioned, that Caltrain electrification we think of as a foundational step towards full modernization. Ultimately, we want to fully electrify the Caltrain corridor and get the diesels off this corridor. It improves air quality. It's better for service performance. But we need to look into the future, and I will give sort of a nod to the State Rail Plan, the 2018 State Rail Plan. If you're not familiar with it, it's an interesting document that talks about statewide passenger rail networks and how the Caltrain corridor fits into that. We are, as you're going to hear from Kelly, a blended corridor with California high-speed rail. And so the Caltrain business plan is a strategic document that starts to look at what is our long-term service vision, how do we organize ourselves to support that service vision, and ultimately what are some of the community both impacts and benefits of growing. This says stakeholder outreach. What we did is we gathered together several months ago all of the partners that sort of touched the Caltrain corridor. We're organized as a joint powers board. Santa Clara County, San Mateo County, and San Francisco County govern us, but we also have many, many stakeholders, including high-speed rail in the state of California and others that help kind of think about what the Caltrain corridor should or could look like in the future. And so the business plan is going to sort of attack these three fronts, if you will. What is the service vision? So how much should we grow? We're currently going to put 6 trains per peak hour with electrification. That's kind of our baseline, and we are going to be exploring, should it be more than that? What is possible? The State Rail Plan suggests some pretty high levels of service on the Caltrain corridor, so we're going to explore kind of what that future could look like. Likewise, we have to look at what kind of organization do we need to support that. We have a contract operator that works for us and actually runs the service. And so as you evolve and grow, is the organization suited to deliver that service? And then we know on the third kind of leg of the stool that we have community benefits, but we also recognize there's community impacts with Caltrain, and that we have to sort of acknowledge how we fit into the community fabric with our growing service and what that means. I want to mention that the City of San Jose is a partner with us in this process. We are going to be doing this work over about 12 months. Our board is very anxious to sort of endeavor this work and move as quickly as we can. So in roughly 6 months, we expect we'll take a service vision proposal to the Caltrain board, and hopefully they'll adopt that. So that sort of sets the stage for what the future could look like. In the meantime, there will be community outreach around how we gather the Peninsula Corridor feedback around what that service vision looks like. Caltrain and board adopts it, and then we're able to take sort of a deeper dive in the second half, and then ultimately about a year from now deliver a full business plan with a long-range service vision attached to it to the Caltrain board of directors. And I think with that,
thank you. It's great to be here tonight to talk a little bit about the high-speed rail and to give the group an update on the 2018 draft business plan. There's still opportunities to comment on the business plan if you're interested. Till May 7th, you can visit our website or email. The schedule for adoption of the business plan is the board will take it up at their May board meeting, and then they do have to submit that plan to the legislature by June 1st. But quickly, there have been some changes in the draft 2018 plan from the 2016 business plan. The draft 2018 business plan proposes a new path forward for completing the valley-to-valley line. Originally, the valley-valley line went from the city of San Jose to just north of Bakersfield. But under the new plan, the valley-to-valley line will actually go from San Francisco to the city of Bakersfield. Our first priority is to complete the construction underway in the Central Valley and to meet our federal requirements. We did receive ARA funding, and included with that were specific requirements that we needed to meet, which was completing 119 miles of track and have service in the Central Valley by 2022, and to complete our environmental documents by that date. We will continue to work on our environmental work for the entire line, including advancing our engineering and design work. On the path to implementing the full valley-to-valley line, we propose to invest funds to develop actually 224 miles of high-speed rail-ready infrastructure on the two lines, one in the Central Valley, which is that original segment, and then the Silicon Valley piece, which is San Francisco to Gilroy, looking at a blended infrastructure with electrification through Gilroy. Our goal is to begin testing high-speed rail trains and begin service on these two lines by 2026, 2027, and provide early benefits before we complete the full line. We would also complete work on the Pacheco Pass tunnels, the critical link between the Central Valley and the Bay Area, and we're looking to complete that by 2029. So our goal is to have full service on the valley-to-valley line from San Francisco to Bakersfield by 2029.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm Eric with the City of San Jose. To go pick up on what John said earlier about how important Diridon Station is, this graphic gives you an idea of the types of volumes we're talking about. And I should say this is before the Google announcement, this diagram was proposed. So we're basically talking about a 10-fold increase over current volumes. So Diridon Station is very important. And I think for many of you who have been involved in the community for a long time, there's been a recognition that this is something really singular, really important for the Bay Area. But as you know, we have many agencies that have a stake in the station, and that's been a big challenge for us in moving forward with a project. And you know, with that in mind, we're really thankful that Spur, with funding from the Knight Foundation, made it possible for some of us to travel last summer to Europe to see some examples of real working stations that were not just great transportation facilities, but really engines for economic development and just, frankly, just great places, great public places. So some of the central lessons that we learned when we were there is it's really important to aim high. You really shouldn't start with your constraints, you know, especially on a project of this significance. Another really important notion is that, you know, and this is something we didn't understand so well in the 1960s, that transportation projects are sort of city building projects. So when you build that elevated freeway, when you build that elevated rail line, you're creating the parameters for future urban development, the quality of life there. That said, transportation infrastructure, there are some pretty strict requirements, for example, on rail lines, on turn radii, things like that. So it's important to get those things right if you want to deliver the kind of service that you need to bring many people into a city center. But at the same time, you don't do that without an understanding of how that's going to impact the communities in which these things are built. So, and finally, if you want people to use these facilities, you really need convenient connections. Overall, our goal is to make all of these investments competitive, mostly with the car, but competitive with other modes so that people will choose to use them because they're a more attractive option. So on our trip, we went to the Netherlands and France, and we were based in Amsterdam. The Netherlands is really well known for having a really well-integrated national rail system. It's also well known, as you know, for prioritizing bicycle infrastructure and walking infrastructure. And I think really from our trip, what was really interesting is the creativity that comes from constraints. As you may know, a good part of the country is actually below sea level, and that would seem like a pretty major constraint for doing much of anything. But actually, what's amazing about the Netherlands is how there's a lot of ingenuity and creativity that actually stems from that constraint. Case in point here in Amsterdam main station, one of the city's main crosstown bike routes actually is incorporated into the station. You see the station canopy sheltering the bike lane. So this goes along this pretty narrow stretch of land actually reclaimed from the Eye River. So anyway, pretty amazing what they did there, and as you can see, very, very beautiful and pleasant. The station, frankly, that a lot of the South Bay decision makers fell in love with was Rotterdam Central Station. Again here, pedestrians and bicycles are prioritized. As you can see right here, off to the side, you have very convenient access to light rail, so very convenient connections there. And also a very bold architectural move here with this roof, but yet they actually, there's a nod to the past. They reused the lettering from the old station that they demolished and the clock tower. And on the backside here, there's there's not a backside, there's another side to the station that fronts onto the residential neighborhood and really is a good neighbor to that residential neighborhood. So parallels to here in San Jose, as you can see. I won't dwell on this too much, but what's interesting here about Utrecht is that this is the busiest station in the Netherlands. It accommodates 300,000 passengers per day, and it does this in the heart of this really quaint, nice city with many buildings dating to back to the Middle Ages. So anyway, it's very hard to imagine accomplishing this kind of thing, having this kind of a transportation facility in the heart of a city with an airport or a freeway interchange. So that's really the opportunity we have here with all these rail investments. And finally, we went to France. France is really well known for bold, visionary design thinking and political leadership. We went to the northern French city of Lille, and it's not advancing. There it goes. And really the big lesson here of this city is it was a declining northern French city, sort of the Rust Belt of France. And they used this construction of a big transportation facility, this rail station, to become a more significant place. So, bring more people through the city to actually create a more dynamic and interesting place. So I think there are also obvious parallels there for San Jose. Okay. Yeah, I think I'm not going to go through all of this. But so we're working with a team of Dutch designers, actually the designers who designed some of those stations I just showed you. And they have a pretty compelling concept for how we move forward and to galvanize support among our many stakeholder groups around what they call a shared spatial vision. It's not enough to just write a paragraph and talk about a rosy future, but actually to show something concrete that people will then rally around. So that's what we're working on now. And also, their concept is that we develop our organizational framework, how we work together, how our many groups work together efficiently, and we move work forward on that as we move forward on the design work. And it was pretty compelling to us. So just the key components of the plan here. I talked about a lot of the purposes, but the plan that we're going to prepare is called the concept plan. Allows spatial layouts for the tracks, the rough approximate envelope of the station building, how it relates to the neighborhoods, multimodal station access. Also, like I said, an organizational framework and strategies for funding and implementation. And here are some of the key elements. I'll let you review this in the meeting packet, but some of the key So the rough project boundary and some of the key elements that are influencing our thinking about the station area. And with that, I'll turn it over to John to finish up.
Thanks, Eric. So here we are. We're actually just getting started with this. So as pointed out by the 4 partner agencies, this really is partnership is key. You saw that on one of the slides. So that all 4 agencies are really moving this comprehensive idea and plan forward. We will be actually engaging that team of consultants this summer to get them started on doing this spatial layout. It's going to be an important project that we want to have this group help us with. We have never done something like this before. No one's done a station like this around here before. So we actually need all of the 4 agencies, all the stakeholders in this group to really help us get to the end of the line with a really great concept plan for this station. So I think we're going to open it up for questions. And how do you want to do this, Dave?
Thank you very much, all. Yeah, so now we wanted to open it up to questions to you. Yes, for sure. Yes. Lee is reminding me, I'm sorry, we should have had your name tags up here as well, but if you can all please let us know your name and organization for you all and for you all up here before you speak, that would be great. So as a reminder, if you want to flip your name tags up vertically when you're ready to ask a question or discuss, and we'll start with you, Nicole.
Hello, Nicole Brown-Lops on the Alameda. I've spent quite a bit of time in Europe this past year, and one thing that I've noticed that is very different from how we design transit systems in California is it seems that they have a shared objective, and it's to get people to nodes seamlessly, where I feel like sometimes in Los Angeles and in San Francisco, Bay Area, greater, it seems as though each stakeholder's objectives do not align. And so I was curious if this board up here, you have a shared vision.
Yeah. Eric Island, City of San Jose. So yeah, like I talked about a little bit about this consultant team we're working with and their notion of the spatial vision. And I think, you know, like I said earlier, a big stumbling block for us in doing something great here earlier is the large number of stakeholders. And so this team, what really stood out for us is this notion of a spatial vision. So they start developing, you know, based on all of the features of the site, the constraints, and how rail must come together. They come up with then some basic parameters for the station building, and then presumably, hopefully, that'll be something pretty compelling that will move us both. And I went through it pretty quickly, but to think about how we're going to contribute to that effort financially, do we need to, you know, a big issue is giving up control. We realize that we're going to need to give up some control in order to, or for the greater good.
Liz Scanlon on Caltrain. I echo what Eric, and I think it's a really good point to raise, because with 4 public agencies and a whole bunch of other competing interests, nice job, it can be challenging to overcome constraints, and I think we've spent a lot of time as partner agencies together to really kind of unpack what each agency's objectives, core goals are, and then how do we intersect in kind of in the common good, and then where are we not quite on the same page. And I think as we go through this integrated station concept plan, we're going to keep digging into that. Eric talked about the organizational kind of structure, and that's intended to help us sort of identify a decision-making process. And I think the point about control is really important. We all have to lean into the process together, and we're all kind of signing up to give up some level of control. But I think what was really compelling on the trip was the expression that you're not going to get everything you wanted, but you're going to get more than you ever expected. And we've all sort of taken that to heart. So right now, we're feeling pretty confident that the agreements and things that we've outlined are going to at least put those issues on the table so we can actually talk about them and find ways to get through them.
Great. Thank you, Erica. Liz. We'll go to Leslie next.
Leslie Hamilton, Guadalupe River Park Conservancy. Back to financing. How do you anticipate funding the station? Are there air rights or development rights that are being looked at in addition to anything that you might have from federal or state funds?
I'll start and then hand it to Liz. But I mean, again, to go back to what we just said, you know, I think from the get-go, there hasn't been the resources, there hasn't been the agreement to do something big here because there hasn't been something compelling to move people to do that. So we think the first step is to come up with this plan and the spatial vision. The plan starts to get at how much money we might need. We are, of course, pursuing funding, first for planning, but also in June, the Bay Area will vote on RM3. RM3 has $100 million for Diridon Station if it passes, so that would put us into a whole new league.
Yeah, I think in the other, sort of the question around air rights, Caltrain owns quite a bit of land at that station as the property owner, and we are definitely considering how we can leverage air rights as part of the grand, sort of the bold vision. I think funding is going to always be the challenge for public agencies, and I think what we're exploring is kind of creative ideas that come from our international partners around how we think about that, and then sort of kind of chip away at where we can leverage local and regional and state investment against maybe private investment. So we'll see where that takes us, but it's definitely a challenge to be solved.
Great, thank you all. Bill, you're next.
Hi, I'm Bill Selders. I represent the Downtown Residents Association. And I've got a question. What you experienced in Europe, did they do anything to significantly limit automobile traffic as part of their strategy? The reason I ask is that I was at a meeting this afternoon, and there was a developer talking about building around the BART station in Berryessa, and one of the requests was to add a 101 exchange, which seemed counterintuitive to me.
Well, maybe I'll take that and I'll bring up the slide of Utrecht again. You know, I've actually done a lot of work on this, and you know, I did some I was on loan to the High Speed Rail Authority and did work on station access policy. So the key strength of a train station is that it's a space-efficient inner-city facility. Okay, so if you don't recognize that and embrace this for all aspects of your plan, whether it's the development, you need dense development, but you also need to use the modes that bring the most people into your station with the least amount of space, but also the least impact on the quality of urban life, you know, so least emissions, least noise. So did we visit, so this station, for example, has 500 car parking spaces for, it says right there, for 300,000 people. So yeah, but it's partially that cars are just, once you reach certain densities, cars are just impractical. I mean, they're just not the best way to get to a place like this. Although I'll note the Rotterdam example that I did show actually does have a pretty large underground car parking garage, 7,600 spaces. That is not just for the station, it also is for a pretty large office tower development across the way. So we saw a bit of everything.
Great, thank you. We're going to go here to Pete and then to Harvey. And if you all could just continue to let us know your organization, I'm sorry, just so it's taped correctly and all that, that would be great. Thank you.
Pete Kolstad, Market Almaden. Where's the airport in all this? Why aren't we also discussing connections to the airport?
Yeah, so the partnership is starting.
Name and organization, please.
Sorry. Jill Gibson with VTA. So I think the focus has been on Caltrain, High Speed Rail, the City of San Jose, and VTA as an initial partner as we're organizing and executing agreements. But certainly we will bring in our stakeholders, the other transit operators in the airport would be a stakeholder as well. So in this initial effort, you've heard from the four of us, but definitely more stakeholders are involved, will be involved in the effort.
Well, I'll just say it's definitely, this is from the consultant team, and you can see airport people mover here is one of the elements on this map. And I think for many of us, to go back to the points I just made about space efficiency, you know, the airport's a place, you know, airports aren't as space efficient as train stations. And this is a place, given how close it is to Diridon, where you could have some of those more land-hungry uses, the car parking, the long-term car parking, the car rental facilities. So there's some real potential for synergy there, but we do need something like a really reliable airport people mover, some sort of connector. And sorry, Eric Island, City of San Jose.
Great job, Eric. Well done. All right, Harvey, you're next, and then we'll come to Matt.
Okay. So I've been an advocate of...
Harvey, name and organization.
Oh, I'm Harvey Darnell, North Willow Glen Neighborhood Association. And I've been an advocate of this dense urban station, multimodal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, with shopping and businesses and housing nearby. The question that is problematic for me as North Willow Glen and also the Gardner neighborhood is that initially when High Speed Rail wanted to come in, they wanted to come through our neighborhood with 4 tracks. Well, we did a extensive outreach process to the High Speed Rail Board and convinced them in 2010 that that was environmentally disruptive to the neighborhood and had a lot of environmental justice issues. Fast forward, and they agreed with us, and they took it and withdrew that as a consideration. Fast forward to 2013, they began to look at possible extra tracks, and now I'm hearing, I was on the call, Kelly, with High Speed Rail, the webinar, and I was the question that asked about 3 tracks that only got half of it, so you didn't know exactly where it was. But it seems that you're at least going to come through my neighborhood with 3 tracks, and I hear rumor that the city study that they have done with their consultant is talking about 4 tracks, which puts us back in the same issue with destroying all the progress that we've made in North Willow Glen. So I'd like to hear some answers.
Hi, Kelly Doyle from High Speed Rail. So Harvey, they are under evaluation, different alignments. With the new business plan, our environmental team is looking at different options. They are looking at the city-generated option. They provided that to us. They are, our environmental team is really looking at how to move forward under the new business plan. So I can't really give you a direct answer tonight on that because our environmental team is looking at the different options. Under the new business plan, they are looking at electrification through Gilroy. They are looking at items that the city provided through their city-generated option. But our business plan is a vision document. So we do have to move forward with the environmental process and come out with the alignment that is going to provide the opportunities for our service in the Deardown station.
So the question is you've seen the city-generated plan. The community has not seen it. And here we are sitting here tonight, and we still haven't seen it.
Well, I know our engineering and environmental team are evaluating that. I haven't seen it. I'm part of the planning team. So I am happy to get back and discuss it with you. So we can talk about it offline.
I just wanted to add, we have a community working group meeting on Wednesday night that I think several of you are also going to attend. And we're going to get into all of the details around these questions because I think this is a Caltrain kind of perspective, the rail planning for not just San Jose now, but San Jose to Gilroy, all the way to San Francisco. We're trying to sort of work better together with High Speed Rail on the blended corridor and what's the balance of track alignment versus community impact. So we're going to get into, it's kind of a preview of coming attractions for the community working group that's scheduled for Wednesday. Right? 6 p.m. at the Willow Glen Community Center.
Great, thank you. Matt, you're next, and then we'll go to Edward.
Thanks. Matt Vanderslice with Greenbelt Alliance. Thank you for sharing all of these examples of these other stations and station areas. I think that's really inspiring for what might be able to happen here, and hopefully we can take the best ideas and use them here in the Bay Area. I was interested in the discussion around the interrelationship between these major transit investments and the land uses around them, and wondered if you could speak a bit more to how these different communities have looked at the relationship between the stations catalyzing new development, particularly around a mix of uses, if there's any examples to take from that around how these different places have tackled the right mix of uses, or how the stations can help catalyze a mix of uses, and any financial relationships between the transit and that mix of uses.
Yeah, so there are lots of lessons.
Name and organization.
Sorry, thank you. Eric Idland, City of San Jose. I guess what's interesting in many of these stations the French examples often, stations like this one in Lille are built on centrally located brownfield sites, often former military bases. So this one was a pretty fortuitous site right beside the city center, where so there was an opportunity to a pretty big area that could only be reknit into the urban fabric with a big project. So that's what this was. In terms of land uses, the international literature on this is pretty clear that, well, first off, I mean, you should be building high-speed rail stations mostly in larger, economically productive cities that are pretty dense or hoping to become dense. And typically the best types of development are like here, it's office development, high-density office with a mix of, with some mixed use to create around-the-clock life, more or less. Do you want to add?
Great, thank you. Edward, you're next, and then we'll go to Glenn.
Edward Somm, Shasta-Hanchett Park Neighborhood Association, the neighborhood immediately to the west of Diridon, and a daily Caltrain user for the last 10 years there at Diridon. Diving into the weeds a little on the VTA single bore. In addition to the single bore, I believe, wasn't the northern station basically essentially under West Santa Clara part of that approval as well? And my concern with that is that it is the station option that is farthest from the rest of Diridon, so it's kind of separating uses instead of an opportunity for integrating them. Is that an additional challenge that hopefully some of what you saw last year will help to address, because we're creating separated nodes instead of ideally getting them closer, which the southern station would have?
Jill Gibson, VTA, happy to respond. So you're absolutely correct that part of the board's decision was to select the Diridon North option. And the VTA is looking to the concept plan as a critical piece to inform our station, how we orient the station entrances. So I don't know if you can recall the site plan that we used through our environmental process, but those are kind of placeholders that we cleared an envelope. And so we've got some flexibility to orient the station and connect to the ultimate future Diridon station. We certainly view this process and the station itself as one project. We don't want it to be kind of a overlapping series of capital projects. And so we look forward to working iteratively with the concept plan through our own, through our engineering process for the BART program.
Great, thank you. Glenn, if you don't mind, I missed Kevin's card here. Kevin, why don't you go, then we'll go to Glenn, and then wrap it up with John.
Okay. Kevin Chrisman, Gardner Neighborhood Association. It's hard to comment on some of the things that you're talking about here because they're, somewhat nebulous concepts that, and vague, that, you guys want to work well together, and that's great. But still, as Harvey points out too, you've got to figure out a way to play well with the neighborhoods as well. With the public comments that we've heard tonight regarding, homeless advocacy, affordable housing and displacement, renters' rights, and that sort of thing, several of your options are going to have a huge play on the neighborhoods, and you will be taking, at one point, I know that we were talking about in the community working groups up to about 160 houses going through San Jose, along with 160 businesses, which should get the business people concerned as well. As I was reviewing some of my notes over the weekend. And with all the housing concerns that we have, you should try to take as few houses as humanly possible, because I know that just through Gardner and North Willow Glen, it's not only just taking a lot of houses, but a house of worship, a church, a park, and you're severely limiting the access to a neighborhood that's not even represented here at all, Gregory Plaza. How they will be able to have access to their neighborhood, and if there's ever like a fire or that sort of thing, how you get that kind of fire trucks and police cars in and out of their neighborhoods will severely impact their neighborhood. And I want to make sure that you, particularly Gregory Plaza, that you don't forget them, because you're really isolating them and making them an island. Thank you.
Great, thanks for the input, Kevin. And all these topics that are bubbling up are going to lead directly into the solution group topics that we've been talking about. So this is great to hear this information now, and we're capturing all your comments to give more kind of energy to those solution groups as we move into them. So we have Glenn, and then I believe we're going to wrap it up with John, unless anyone else would like to speak.
Thank you. I'm Glenn Williams with the County of Santa Clara, and I've got a question sort of directed for Eric. I really loved the illustration of Utrecht with 25,000 bicycle spaces and 500 car parking. And I know from a few months ago I was in Amsterdam, and one of my most memorable experiences was seeing a 2.5 or 3 level parking garage for bikes adjacent to the transit station there as well. If we ever hope to get to something anywhere, in that general direction, the first thing that we have to do is have some place for, you've got to be able to get there. And so the question mark for you is, what is San Jose doing relative to the planning for Diridon to actually create an extensive network of safe, protected bikeways that will allow people to actually utilize that 25,000 space parking garage we're going to build?
I definitely hope we plan for that size of bike parking facility. I think it's one of the great stories that our city can tell is, I'm actually part of the SPUR Transportation Policy Board in San Francisco, and I felt compelled to talk about what our city is doing in the next 2 to 3 years to build out our protected bike network. It's really pretty amazing, starting from where we were in the past. So I think, it's definitely a very high priority of the city. I actually haven't been with the city that long, so maybe Shiloh can even talk a little bit more, and I'm very glad she's part of the SOG. But does anyone else want to?
Caltrain is very excited to have a 25,000 stall bike parking. If you've all ridden our trains and you've been experiencing our onboard bike capacity, we're very excited about that. But your point is well taken, that it has to connect to the local network, which is
Okay, I believe the last one is John.
Hi, John Pettigo from PACT. And the question I have is just, have you thought of anything around workers and low-wage workers that will really depend on some kind of a bus transportation, some low-cost public transportation? Our workforce is moving further and further away from San Jose, but they're still finding employment here, and I don't know what it's going to be like in 20 years or 15 years. That will entire cities be built housing low-cost workers outside of the area? How will they come to the area? Or how will we link people coming from outside areas? Or I don't know what's going to happen, but it's just it's a question that we need to look at. And is there going to be any kind of investment in a bus service, a general bus service that would help workers and transportation. Has that been part of your guys' formula?
Yeah, so far tonight you've heard a lot about the rail side, but certainly the programming of the bus facilities is an integral, important piece of the concept plan, and that will be looked at just as equally to provide the amount of space needed for the bus network. Anything you want to add?
Well, I'll just say that there is a nice relationship between typically space-efficient modes and affordable modes. So I would think that in focusing on many of the more space-efficient modes, we're also going to be helping lower-income people. And then, yeah.
All right, thank you. Looks like we have one last one. Reginald.
Yes, thank you. You in Europe, and they have a different system around the economy and stuff, but did you look at some of the systems about displacement? You talked about the development being in the middle of a city, and this one actually being an old Army base. But did you look at how they dealt with the communal benefits and the communal displacement and issues surrounding that when they expanded their transportation stuff? Did you look at any of that?
Reginald, could you give your full name and organization?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Reginald Swilly, Minority Business Consortium.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I think this is definitely a big focus in many of the French examples where they're redeveloping, like I said, brownfield sites. And, you know, the big difference there is they have these very powerful station area governance entities that have, you know, land use control, they have financing control, and that often these projects are designated projects of national significance with all kinds of additional powers. So there, you know, maybe federal funding to fund affordable housing or, you know, job training. So it is a big part of many of these efforts. I say in the Dutch cases, they're, I would say, a little bit more transportation focused. The French examples are really these combined transportation and urban development examples. But yeah, so there is a focus on those issues. Whether we can transfer all of the lessons is another issue, but I do think there are some transferable lessons.
Great, thank you. And I know I keep saying one last one, but I think we might have one last one here with Shiloh.
So I had the pleasure of piggybacking.
Name and organization,
Shiloh
sorry.
Ballard, the Silicon
you.
Valley Bicycle Coalition. I had the pleasure of piggybacking on one of the tours in France. I crashed one of the tours because I just happened to be there. And Eric led or coordinated this, and I can't even remember the name of the station in France, but I wanted to go back. What do you remember?
It's the Rive Gauche, the left bank of the river in Paris. Yeah.
So I wanted to go back to your first slide. I think it was your first slide, which was really talking about thinking boldly and with vision. And wanted to give you an opportunity to comment a little more because there was a lot of things I took from that tour, and one of them I wanted to highlight, which was they are basically building on top of an existing rail station, creating land to like build a whole new part of the city. And one of the rail corridors was no longer being used, but they were constructing buildings in a way that they were preserving that rail corridor. So they were actually building over the rail corridor and leaving the bottom segment flexible, essentially open, but able to have uses in there that could be torn down real easily if and when the country decides that they need to go back and use that rail corridor. So for me, it was an example. I mean, it was a little bit mind-blowing. Like, they're just going to build these buildings and preserve a rail corridor. It was just, for me, going back to that first slide about being bold and visionary, it was like, well, here it is. They're doing that.
Yeah, Eric Idland, City of San Jose. Do I have to keep saying it?
It's good practice.
So, you know, of course, there are the issues that you mentioned about being bold, but there's also, frankly, just a different perspective on time. And, you know, these are older civilizations, right? Or, I mean, you could debate that maybe, but So the case you're mentioning of, it's called if those of you are familiar with it, the Petite Ceinture, the little belt. So they built the first story of this building so that it had no structural elements, and you could build through it with tracks later. But this was really something sort of hypothetical that they were planning around. So there's the different sense of time, a longer term perspective, and just, again, more powerful government and more continuity in government as well, which is very important for some of these mega projects. A big challenge in the US, frankly, for a lot of these projects.
Great. I believe that does it. I want to thank Liz, Eric, Jill, and Kelly. Thank you very much for those presentations. And now we're going to transition to the TED Talks, and I'm going to hand it over to Matt.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Matt Ramey, trying to get on the next presentation here. So we are shifting over to our TED Talks. Get a little background for this. In some of our previous meetings, as well as some of our conversations with individual members of the SOG, we heard that folks want to have an opportunity to provide their ideas, their organization's position on what this area could be and what the concerns are. So we sort of working with the group came up with this idea of TED Talks, and that is giving each member of the SOG an opportunity to have unscripted time. We're not asking a question, we're not presenting something and asking for feedback on that. We are giving each person the opportunity to speak and present their ideas. Besides just straight information sharing, we have timed this portion of the work here to feed into our solution groups. So the idea is that we'll take the information, the ideas that come out of these TED Talks, and then that information, the specific ideas, can serve as the launching point for the solution groups. So as we heard, we have five TED Talks tonight. Each one will be 4 minutes. We are going to have our timer. We will be somewhat strict on that. Lauren, if we could set the timer for 4 minutes, and if we could have each of the 5 presenters come on up to the front of the room here. We have your slides. Folks provided slides or information if they wanted to, and we have them queued up here. So after we get through these 5 talks, we're going to have some opportunity for discussion. And I think what would be helpful, not only questions to each of the 5 who are presenting, but also if you notice or hear any themes or any ideas that you think the group should consider and that should be brought forward into the solution groups, if you could echo that, that would be really helpful. A couple of quick things. First is that, as Lee mentioned, we are going to have public comments again at the end and after this. So if you want to speak again in the public comment period, if you want to fill out a comment card and bring that up front, please do so. The second is that you saw folks moving around rapidly here. We do not, since we just got a bunch of this information from the SOG members, we don't have copies for everyone right now, but we will have this up first thing tomorrow morning. We will have these presentations up, so you all from the public will be able to look at those. Okay. Why don't we start? So this is a little bit of an experiment here. I've actually never done this in a group like this, so we're gonna see how it goes, and hopefully we all like it. And just so everyone from the public knows, this is time that each of the members can say whatever they want. So we have not seen this. It's completely unscripted. So Shiloh, take it away. Best of luck. There we go.
I kind of feel like Glenn did my TED Talk earlier with his last comment about bikes, so thank you for the foreshadowing. Okay, can't really read that, at least I can't. So again, my name's Shiloh Ballard. No, I don't, thank you. Leslie. I run the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition. We believe bikes are the solution to most everything. We have a staff of 10 just a couple blocks from here. I wanted to start by hearkening back to the General Plan Task Force to remind us all about one of the things that those of us who were on the General Plan Task Force fought really hard for. And that was these fairly aggressive mode share goals. And for those of you who can read that, there's the goal for 2040, and then there's our baseline. And so, for example, people who drive single occupancy vehicles, currently we're at about 80%, and our goal is 40%. Biking is 15% in 2040. We're currently at about 1.2%. The reason I'm bringing this up is because I just want to remind us of this is our goal, and here in the Diridon area, we have an opportunity, and we have to actually double those goals, because that's a citywide goal. And folks who live in Almaden Valley are probably going to stay at that 1% biking rate. And so here in this area, we have to do much, 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 much better than what those goals are. And those goals are hard. So I just wanted to remind us that in this area, we have to go way beyond those goals. Slide, okay. The ways we can do that, and I'm going to breeze through this really quickly. Transportation demand management and trip caps. We at the Bike Coalition work in 2 counties, and we see a huge difference between those cities that have a regulatory framework that constrains how many single occupancy vehicles can be going into an area. For example, the North Bayshore area versus North San Jose. It's a very different conversation that we have when we're talking with a company that's located in North San Jose versus a company that's located in the North Bayshore area in Mountain View. Because in North San Jose, there is no trip cap, there's no requirement to be limiting the number of people who are coming in just in one vehicle, versus in the North Bayshore area where there is. And so you have companies in North Bayshore who are trying really, really, really hard to get people to ride bikes and ride their shuttles. And so I say that because policy matters in this particular conversation, and we have the ability to adopt policies that will then pleasantly coerce folks who are in the area to be working hard to get folks to transport themselves in different ways. And then I just have 2 slides that talk about bikes and connectivity in and around this area. Again, Glenn stole my thunder a little bit with the bike parking. I want to specifically talk about bike parking. We need safe and secure bike parking. And there's this great video that I have linked there. I don't think I can play it, but basically there's a big cylinder in the ground, and you roll your bike up to this, these doors that open like this. You roll your bike into it, and then the bike drops down and it spins around and it gets parked in there. And we could do that in some places here. That would be awesome. That's the kind of parking that we could have, and it would be safe and secure. But there are lots of different ways that we can park bikes. So I wanted to highlight bike parking. And then the last thing I wanted to highlight was just, again, and Glenn said this, the connectivity and the flow in and around this area, and making sure we're paying close attention to that. We have 2 trail networks that are supposed to meet up at some point, and that's very exciting. When we at the Bike Coalition ask folks, we know about 60% of folks say, I want to ride my bike for everyday use, but I'm a little afraid. And when we ask them the next question, which is, well, under what circumstances would you not be afraid to ride your bike? What do you think people say? Trail.
A trail. Now, we also know that we can't build trails everywhere, but we can use our existing infrastructure to create a trail-like feeling on our on-street network through protected bike lanes. So we do have the trails that can connect here, but we also have the ability to create a trail-like feel through protected bike lanes. So with that, I will pass the mic.
Let's give Shiloh a hand for being the first one here. So we're gonna thank you. It was great. We're gonna hold questions. Please write down questions that you have and comments. We're gonna come back to that at the end. Oh, we did get 4 minutes. Excellent. We were going 2 minutes and 2 minutes, so I hope it didn't throw you off. Yeah, we gave you a few extra seconds because of that. Next, Jean, do you have slides?
I do.
You got this right there.
Good evening. My name is Jean Cohen. I'm the Political and Communications Director for UA Local 393, the Plumbers Fitters Union here in San Jose and Santa Clara County. And I'm representing the Santa Clara and San Benito Counties Building and Construction Trades Council on this task force. The building trades is made up of 25 skilled craft unions. That represents about 30,000 skilled construction workers, including carpenters, iron workers, laborers, painters, electricians, and the complement of folks you see listed here on slide 1. So very briefly, what do we do? Our members and our contractors build and construct Silicon Valley. We built that beautiful building right there. We spend a lot of time on training and education, specifically our apprenticeship and education pipelines that develop skilled craft trades professionals. And who we are San Jose. Our members live here, they work here, and they raise their families here. I think an important thing that I wanted to bring to the table is some brief background about the unique opportunities of apprenticeship programs as pipelines to good family-sustaining careers for people in San Jose. The state of California sets the guidelines for how apprentice standards are set, and then those programs are administered locally through community colleges, through programs like the City of San Jose's Work to Future program. And anybody who is interested in becoming a member of the building and construction trades has a few different pipelines and paths to achieving that process. If you want to go to work and you're willing to go to school for a few years and learn the trade, you have an opportunity to have a career here in Santa Clara County in the building trades. Just pivoting a little bit towards this body here and some of the opportunities and ideas for the Google project. Specifically, we would like to build and construct the residential and commercial projects for this development. And we also want to talk about pipelines to good jobs, apprenticeships, and the future workforce. Some things for us to think about are how do we strengthen opportunities to ensure that local youth, veterans, and other target populations have direct access to local construction jobs? And what are the long-term opportunities for Google and the City of San Jose to create and establish mutual benefits between communities and union apprenticeship programs that provide pathways to good jobs? One good example of this right now is the Mayor's Gang Prevention Task Force. They have a trades pilot project to help local youth get job training in partnership with some of the building trades and the Work to Future program here. And then in summary, some of the opportunities or conversations that our members are looking forward to having are how do they contribute to designing and constructing strong, quality, beautiful buildings and spaces? How do we create paths and opportunities for family-sustaining careers? How do we strengthen and establish apprenticeship pipelines? How do we engage working families in a community dialogue about growth and development? And how do we build a community where everybody thrives? Thank you.
Thank you. Very, very well done. You did a great job of pivoting some of the ideas to what are the asks, what are the ideas for the Diridon Station area. So we should keep that thread going.
Yes, I'm Reginald Swilley with Minority Business Consortium. What we believe that there is power in diversity and inclusion in every aspect of our economic life. And we think that diversity and inclusion will actually benefit us collectively economically. We believe in development. You know, I made the statement in our first meeting about looking at our skyline, and I thought we have a pitiful skyline for a city of 1 million people. Now, our neighbor to the north have a very impressive skyline, but that skyline was developed because it was a world-class city over a lot of years. But Minneapolis, Minnesota, is the one that really shook me when I drove into Minneapolis. It's a city less than half our size, and there's a commitment to developing. Now, I don't know that they developed this city in a way that I thought was economically as feasible as I think our challenge is. We know we need living spaces in the community. High-rise living spaces is probably going to serve us very well, but we need play spaces and living spaces. But we need to figure out how to do this development and everything that we do going forward, where it benefits the working people, business, and labor. Throughout my time here in politics in San Jose, we've seen like we had a process where we dumb down everything. We always have winners and losers. It's the quickest way we can figure out what we're going to do. We have winners and losers. We have developers and we have citizens. And then once we divide up, we start fighting, and we end up with a skyline looking like ours. And with the problems that we have now with veterans sleeping on our steps and people sleeping on the steps all around downtown. I live a block from here. I walk to this meeting, and every night there's people sleeping around my building, and it makes me sad. And the sadness is because we didn't make some decisions in the past that we should have made. Now, Google is changing the world with the way it is approaching what it does. We have access to knowledge. We have access to different way of advertising. This innovative, progressive company, and we in the middle of an innovative, progressive space in the world. This spot is very rich. We have produced everything we do in this valley seem to work. It fed the world for a while. Now we just paved over all this great land that could grow almost anything, but more innovation poured out. Now, this is what I'm challenging us to do. I'm challenging us to do the same thing with this project that Google and all these high-tech companies has done with information. They have changed the absolute world, right? And we have been negligent in how we approach this type of development, how we approach building our cities, right? We didn't build our cities thinking about what the poorest person would do or the mentally disturbed person that's sleeping on the streets. We have not brought that to the table. There's enough ingenuity in this room that we can commit to. I mean, the top of my statement said, we believe in development. A business mind going towards developing your city in a way that's going to be 40, 50 years down the road, we can look back and say somebody made some good decisions. This is the challenge that I'm making to us, that we can strengthen our construction infrastructure by how we approach all the progress going forward, bringing small businesses and big businesses together so that the small business can develop in the progression from being $100,000 to a couple $1 million. We can broaden our local business approach. We don't want to set a spaceship down in the middle of a business, in the middle of this city, and everything is contained on the inside. And all the businesses around doesn't take part in it. People should come to, the 20,000 people should be able to go to restaurants and stuff all around this development, and not just have it self-contained. And I'm sorry I'm going over time, but the last two are, we need to bring better opportunity to the labor force here, and we need to enhance our communities with the infrastructure. There's a lot of really interesting pieces that we have on the table here. I think we can do this where we benefit everybody, and that there are losers, and we should always consider the people that we are working for, that are sleeping on the streets, and the kids, our grandkids, 50 years from now, what are they going to say we did? Because I think that we did a bad job to get to the place we are now.
Thank you, Reginald. I think we'll definitely want to, no, it's fine. I think we'll definitely want to dive into some of those details because, as you said, we have the ingenuity and the creativity. We need the time to get into those details. So we can start with some of that in the Q&A and discussion. Okay, next, Kathy.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. All right, good evening. My name's Kathy Sutherland, and I am here as a representative of Delmas Park, which is the neighborhood surrounded by 87, 280, Bird, and up to Santa Clara. So we are directly adjacent to the Google structure. And we welcome Google coming into our neighborhood because we've been anxious for redevelopment for a very, very long time. So this is a really good thing for our neighborhood. But what I'm going to talk about, and it's interesting that this is on the Transportation Day, is not about rail and not about bus and not about bikes. It's going to be about the intersection of Bird and 280. This is a mess, to put bluntly. Do you have a pointer?
There's a laser pointer on the red button.
Red button. Okay, so this is Ozare. This is the off-ramp to 280. That's 3 lanes if you're headed north on 280. This is the on-ramp onto 280 north. This is the freeway overcrossing. This is another on-ramp onto 280 south. And then the off-ramp from 280 south. Delmas Park is in this area over here. Our kids go to elementary school here. They have to cross at grade, or any pedestrian or any bicyclist, have to cross 3 lanes of traffic here at grade. They have to cross 1 lane of traffic here, and then they have to cross the free right-hand turn known as the pork chop. I have always been terrified that there's going to be somebody who's going to be hit by a car coming off of the freeway as they choose to bike or walk along this strip. Okay, so this is, once again, this is closer, this is 280 south. Kids walk down here, they get signalized here, then they have to make the free right-hand, or crossing here, with cars from Bird Avenue going this way to get onto 280. And their school is over in this area over here. Oops, sorry, where'd it go? Oh, and this is what I call the Great Weave. So this is Ozare going west. This is Ozare headed east. Orchard Supply is over here. You have 3 lanes of traffic coming off of 280 right here. The first lane's a right-hand turn lane. The middle lane is a right or left-hand turn lane. And the far left lane is left-hand turn only. When it's busy and people are trying to go this way on Ozare, you'll find cars backed up along this left-hand turn lane. There's only enough room for 3 cars, so that if you've got a double tractor trailer going to Reed and Graham, it in effect is a car and a tractor trailer, and traffic has to cross 3 lanes to get to the left-hand turn lane. Then if you're headed on Ozare trying to get to one of the freeway entrances, if you want to go north on 280, you're crossing these cars here that are trying to go this way if they're trying to go south on 280, or just making the immediate U-turn to get onto 280. And then the weave is incredible. So you've got cars coming this way who try and turn this way, cars that go this way, trying to turn this way. The amount of space here is just not working. And even though we are going to be a rail and a bike and a pedestrian area, we're also going to expect more vehicles. And the intersection's not going to be able to take it. And so I really think that one of the things that we think about as the Diridon, the SOG that's looking at the whole development of this area, is that we don't restrict our view to the new transit that's coming in for rail. We have to look at this thing holistically and look at the existing conditions that are wrong that really do need to be cleaned up.
Thank you, Kathy. All right, Bill.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bill Souders, and I represent the San Jose Downtown Residents Association. I actually represent homeowners, and my colleagues tonight, Whitney represents renters, and Paul is sitting in for our representative who represents someone who is formerly homeless. So I happen to live about a quarter of a mile from the Diridon station, so this is something that is obviously of great importance to me. And what I'd like to talk about tonight is what I'm calling the Chrysalis Project. For what it's worth, I'm trying to be creative here. I got a degree in marketing years ago and never used it, so here you go. Anyway, if you look around downtown right now, those of us that live that close to Diridon are already in the middle of a construction zone. Look around at the cranes. It's all fantastic. It's all good things that are happening. Like you, we certainly appreciate development for what it's worth. But I think the important thing for us to consider is what do the next 7 years, or in fact 9 or 10 years after we heard about the light rail, really look like for those of us that live at ground zero in a good way. 30 years ago, the San Jose Downtown Association was formed primarily to provide economic relief for businesses that were impacted by the implementation of light rail, and I'll emphasize financial support for businesses. This was, no offense to the Downtown Association, but 30 years later, as a resident, First Street, Second Street, Santa Clara, those things where the Downtown Association was really supposed to have an impact, are quite frankly not very attractive. There are empty storefronts, and what I would like to say is let's get a jump on this, because 30 years later we can see how long it takes to really activate things. So moving to what I would suggest as an idea would be mitigation with some sort of early activation. We talked about this a little bit with Google a week or so ago. And it's not just mitigation and hunkering down through the construction, but it also gives us an opportunity to really work on some clever design. One of the things that you see happen often, and I saw it happen at San Jose State, again, no offense to San Jose State, when they closed San Carlos Street, they planted all this wonderful grass. And then they put pathways in, they put in cement pathways, and after the first semester, you realize people don't walk that way, they walk this way. So let's use this early activation as a way to figure out what might really work around this construction site. The other thing is it would soften the construction zone. Instead of walking under scaffolding, maybe we can make the construction itself be something of interest. So we could do things like have educational tours of things that are happening with construction, kiosks for input, virtual reality about what this is going to look like, things like that. So anyway, even many design competitions for things that have not yet been decided. I think if we do this, we can engage businesses, residents, and even future employees. Let's bus Google employees down from Mountain View and let them check out restaurants and things like that so they can add their voice to the planning. Part of this would also be the ability, to anticipate and prepare for attracting businesses and other service providers. I'd like to think that this would be kind of a rational experimentation, not only for the Guadalupe River Park revitalization, which I know Spur and Leslie are working on, but also I would hope that if you look at Santa Clara Street, the Alameda, and even all the way up to Alum Rock, that could be our Grand Boulevard if we do this correctly. So, I'll, let the SAP Center and our beloved San Jose Sharks speak for themselves. But as neighbors, what I think we should do is really think about brainstorming this early activation and mitigation as part of the Neighborhood Quality of Life Solution Group. Let's engage with the appropriate people, Google, San Jose Planning Department, and others. And I know I missed the meeting on the 19th, which was the urban design guidelines. So plugging into that in some way. And then participate with folks that are already working on this. Again, Spur, Public Life with Gail and Knight Foundation. Thank God for the Knight Foundation. Urban village planning activities and so forth. So with that, I'm excited to get on with construction, but let's make it pleasant for everyone.
Great. Thank you. All right, let's give all folks here a hand for going first here. Okay, so now we have some time for questions and some time for discussion. And as you guys are thinking about your questions, I'm going to start this off with, I guess I'm going to treat this a little bit like a panel because there's just 5 of you. I actually thought this was fascinating as a group of 5 here because you talked about fixing what's wrong now, planning for the problems and the challenges during a significant amount of construction and thinking about that now. You talked about business, labor, and residents, how people are going to get to the station, who's going to work there, and how they're going to work there in the future. I mean, it's sort of a microcosm, I think, of what this group has been talking about. And so I guess the question I want to sort of start. And we didn't actually plan this as I'm winging it here. Reginald, I want to sort of start maybe with, because you gave this great challenge to everyone. So maybe everyone can, starting with you, maybe everyone can say here and then others can chime in about like, what is that, the one thing, if you think it's going to be really critical, that has to happen? What is that challenge to overcome the mistakes of the past and make it so that this area can develop and develop for everybody?
Well, the evidence that we got people sleeping around the streets, the housing is ridiculous, and our children have been educated. They can't even live here. All my kids graduated from college, and the housing is just ridiculous. And we didn't plan this correctly, right? So I have a history of calling our generation the worst generation ever. Education used to be free when I was a kid. I mean, we could go to college for little or nothing. Now my kids owe hundreds of thousands of dollars. But so the thing is, the challenge for me and for us is that all the issues that we see that are wrong right now, we need to consider that as we go forward in developing San Jose, right? This committee can make a decision around how we apply contracting. Now, my business is try to bring previously unengaged business communities into the contracting possibilities so that the big guys don't come in, get all the money and leave, and then we have a building, we have a facility, but the economic structure around us didn't help, didn't get benefited any. We need to turn over our dollars 3 or 4, 5, 6, 7 times in our community, right? And all the time, the lowest responsible bidder does not mean it's the most economically beneficial to our community. So I'm saying let's take those kind of attitudes towards towards this work. There's a lot of money getting ready to be spent in this town. There's a lot of kids coming out of college that could say, aha, I can start me businesses and I can be involved. But the way capitalism is set up right now and the way we do our business right now, that kid would never have a chance because the electrician company, the cement company, the construction company will elbow out any new company that come in. If he's got a company worth $20, $30 million, and I got a company worth $500,000, and we come to this city to try to get part of any contract, he's going to elbow me out. He might take a loss on this next one just to keep me from developing. Okay. And I'm saying there's lots of issues around that, around housing, and how we spend this money, and what playing field, how we develop the playing field for our economy and our development going forward.
Okay. Great.
You know, I can speak for
Yeah, I
30
know.
minutes.
I was trying not to cut you off. So let's keep the answers. I mean, I think it's great. Let's keep the answers short so everyone can say anything. Does anyone else want to sort of like, what is that challenge? What is that one thing that you? And you can say your name first. Sorry, I'm taking my cue from Dave.
I'm Shiloh Ballard with the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition. I guess the one thing that I would say is how we build the physical environment impacts culture. And so to be mindful of that. Ultimately, for me, and I think a lot of people around the room, a healthy, thriving community is one in which we interact with each other. We're forced to interact with each other. Touching human beings is a really good, healthy thing to do. And you know, just if you look at the table, how this is set up, that impacts how we relate to each other. You know, are we close to each other or what? We can be very deliberate about our built environment so that we are forcing folks to touch each other more and communicate more. And I would just put out there that we have the opportunity to do that.
Okay, so group hug before we leave in the center.
So one of the things that I'd like to bring up is that this area where we're looking at having Google develop has a lot of man-made barriers that are very large to cross. The Delmas Park neighborhood has been very isolated from downtown, from the Alameda, because of things that are there. On one side, it's the train tracks. On the other side, it's 87. South, it's 280, and north, it's Santa Clara. So Delmas Park is very isolated, but very close. We just had a walking tour, and one of the things that our neighborhood always says that it wants is a neighborhood park. And I always feel like we are so park rich, but the fact that you have to cross under 87 makes it feel like it's another place. And so what I'd like to see come out of this is that we figure out how to make this area more connected to the north and the south and the east and the west and the communities there, and because it could develop in isolation because there are some really big constructed barriers there.
Okay. Bill, Jean, you guys want to add, or can we? Okay. Does anyone have questions? If you want to turn up your card, good. I just want to make sure we got the juices flowing here. All right. Why don't we start with Kevin? Name and organization.
Thank you. Kevin Chrisman, Gardner Neighborhood Association. When you're talking about some of the things that came up about what we can do to make this all work is go back to the Google principle of have a healthy disregard for what's impossible. I know that it was mentioned earlier that 30 years ago that a lot of the planning that was done was annex land and make it a delight, Valley's delight for the developers, really. And greed took over. And when greed takes over, you get bad results. You get two polar opposites. You get people who have very much, and then you have people that live in doorways. And we need to cut back on the idea that there's enough to go around is just not very well distributed right now. And if we would pay more attention to how we distribute things, we could all win. You wouldn't have these winners and losers like we have right now. Also, Kathy, you really hit home because your kids are coming into our neighborhood for the Gardner Academy. And one of the things that we fought for during the S&I days was that fencing that went in on the east side of Bird. So because before that, the kids had no barrier between them and the cars. And it's been interesting to see over the years, since that's been put in, how many times cars have hit that, and how Caltrans has been a very bad neighbor in that they are very negligent in repairing that, and they've let it degrade, and we should push on them to get it back up to the standard that it was when they first put it in.
inspired by Kathy's comments. I think that one thing that I really liked when I read the Diridon Station plan was this idea of green fingers throughout, that area of using parks as transportation nodes. When my girlfriend and I, who's back there, were in Berlin, we went over rivers, we went past like 4 lanes of traffic through parks. Parks were where restaurants were. Parks were the way to navigate through the whole city. And at night, it just felt very safe. And it was just, Berlin is now my favorite city because parks are transportation. I never knew that was possible. So that's also something, I think Kathy would love her kids to walk safely through a park to their elementary school.
Thanks. Matt.
Question for Matt Vanderslice with Greenbelt Alliance. Question for Shiloh. We made some significant progress in the specific plan for Diridon that was adopted in 2014 in terms of adding some concepts to make the area more walkable and bikeable. As you point out, the general plan has some very, very ambitious goals, and we need to do quite a lot to meet or exceed those goals. What's the delta that you see from the adopted plan we have and where we need to be in terms of walking and biking infrastructure for the Diridon Station area?
I don't know. If you want a number, it's 32. No. I don't know, but it's a lot. I just know that if we're going to achieve those goals, we have to do so much more in the Diridon area. So that's where I fall back on things like TDM and policy to really push the actors in that area that have leverage over how we all behave. So I don't know. Does anyone have a guess? 42.
And Shiloh, in your presentation, you talked about the trip cap at North Bay Shore. Are you suggesting that as an example of something to look at here?
Definitely suggesting it as something to look at. I think there's probably lots of ways that we can achieve our mode shift goals, and trip caps are one tool that we should definitely put into our palette of things we're looking at. It may not work for us. It seems to work up there just fine. In North San Jose, we just don't have anything. In fact, when a lot of that development was going in, we lowered the transportation fees there because we were like, please come to North San Jose. We won't charge you anything. But other cities go the exact opposite way. They say, if you're going to come here, then you need to figure out how to get your folks here in a different way. And we should do that.
Okay.
And not be afraid that people aren't going to come, because they will. Google's coming.
All right, Edward.
To riff to a certain extent, something Shiloh had mentioned, but that Bill and Reginald as well. Something at the very beginning of the first meeting that we talked about with any development of this size. San Jose has a history sometimes of, for lack of a better phrase, Edward Sum, Shasta-Hanshaw Park Neighborhood Association, giving away the bank to get a development or a large business to come in. And that was a concern that was mentioned at kind of the first couple meetings of everybody here. And one thing that I think everybody should be aware of, there was a study session at City Council on Thursday where a series of developers and a study was completed, and the premise of the study was how much do we need to further cut city fees, including park fees, to make developments more attractive. Mm-hmm. And the mayor in an interview said the other day that maybe cutting the fees completely might be in some instances what needs to happen, and that includes park fees. And disproportionately, a lot of the neighborhoods around the Diridon Station area, a lot of neighborhoods are park deficient. And if we're continuing to further cut, when we've got a 293 million, I think now, Kim, in a backlog of park maintenance, if we're cutting fees even further for individual developments, what precedent does that set for something as large as Google? I mean, how much are we going to give away to get that done when this should be an example of getting amenities rather than compromising amenities for the sake of the density that is being proposed?
Okay, Harvey? Name, organization?
Harvey Darnell, North Willow Glen Neighborhood Association. I want to thank you all. All your presentations were quite inspiring. There were I had questions for all of you, but I didn't write them down. I do remember two. One was remarking and supporting what Kathy was saying. I've lived in that neighborhood for 35 years, the south side. So she's talking her perspective from the north side. I can tell you this perspective from the south side. And it is astounding, all those unprotected places where children have to cross. How many cars, I count them because I get stuck at the lights, how many cars will go through, 6 or 7 sometimes, go through the red light? It's just amazing. And I was involved with Kevin in getting that fence and also revamping the pathway behind the school so that it was a safer way to get to the school. I also was involved in the bike lanes on Bird Avenue. That was my project. It kept going away and it kept bringing it back. Unfortunately, it stops just before Virginia, and it picks up at San Carlos again, I think. And we've got a stretch where there's no protection for bikes there. And I recently, yesterday, went to Campbell, and I was going to do a further bike trip past Campbell, and it's my first time out since the fall. And so I decided to take light rail. So I took the Los Gatos Creek pathway partway to Diridon Station, took the light rail the rest of the way to Campbell, and then came back on the paths. I wanted to ask you, Shiloh, in terms of what you think. I'm going to talk at the next meeting about the possibility of completing the Los Gatos Creek pathway, bike trail. But are there other opportunities in the area that you think that we can do, that you've looked at within that footprint? And then the second question I have of you is, I'm always concerned because I'm constantly out looking at next door, and every day it seems that my bike got stolen. I had a good lock on it, and it got stolen. And what is your thought about how we protect bikes when when people are shopping in the area or going to work, et cetera?
Yeah, I've had a bike stolen too. It's heart-wrenching. We need secure places to lock up our bikes. When we survey our members and we ask them what are the top concerns, and we survey people what are the top barriers to riding your bike, safe, secure bike parking is one that is at the top of the list. So we need to figure that out. Bike share is potentially a solution to that because then you don't actually own the bike and you don't have to worry about it getting stolen. And if we have enough bike share around, especially in a more urban environment where you can't actually store a bike in a small condo, bike share could be an answer to that. So, there's a variety of options out there for safe and secure bike parking that we can talk offline. Your first question in terms of trail access in and around the area. So the Los Gatos Creek Trail ends. The goal ultimately, and it's in the works, is to connect it up with the Guadalupe Trail. It's not perfect as currently envisioned and planned because it doesn't follow the riparian corridor as a trail the entire way. It goes up onto the street. But that's what we planned for. And I know that we've been talking about some opportunities to daylight the riparian corridor. That would be super exciting. But there's a variety of options for on-street networks to make it safe and secure and stress-free for cyclists in that area.
Do you see any opportunity on Bird Avenue, the missing link?
Bird is kind of yucky.
Can I actually recommend that we take the detailed topic discussion of that to the solution group?
Okay.
because I think we're going to want to dive into some of those. Just want to avoid going down in the weeds.
Thank you.
You're welcome. John.
Hi, John Pettigo, PACT. I was really struck by Gene Cohen's kind of presentation because it was kind of concrete and talked about opportunities for engagement, but community employment, and sustainment. There's a lot of ideas out there, Gene, and in Europe there have been like community-led kind of building parks, building trails, not using neighborhood people, local labor, local inspiration for that. And it seems like there's a lot of opportunities, entry points for that in this project. I'd like to hear what you think about that. The other part is if you have any sense of what kind of policies and incentives need to be given out so that we can look at local hires and get local people to do the detailed work that make a cityscape a real cityscape because it's made by people that are in the area, but doing it as a kind of something with labor and artists and engaging people that have been out of work or maybe are unhoused for a while. How do you create partnerships for those types of people, and what kind of policies need to be in place for those kinds of projects?
Thank you, Father John. Just very briefly, I think there are some specific ideas, or if we looked at it as a toolbox or a toolkit that we're establishing here for the different buckets and themes that we're discussing, that we could expand the training pipeline for, in particular, skilled construction workforce through a few different mechanisms. One is establishing prevailing wage standards. Two is apprentice hiring requirements. And you asked maybe for some examples. I can think of a couple local examples, specifically Destination Home, who is a nonprofit that works to make sure that homeless residents in San Jose and Santa Clara County are housed as rapidly and respectfully as possible, has a project and program in partnership with the building trades to try to get homeless residents and people that are kind of on the precipice of losing their homes but have the capacity to have full-time jobs but just need some stability to make sure that they don't lose their homes, are being brought together through Destination Home to get training in the TOPS Trades Orientation Program. And then just very briefly, I think the gentleman over here on the left asked about fees and giveaways and kind of what are the opportunities for the community and for the businesses that are developing to come together. We might want to look at the Oakland Army Base and also the Hunters Point, the shipyard project in San Francisco, as two opportunities that the community came together with business and government to find solutions that made the project work for everybody.
Great, and I think those are some of the specifics, and even diving deeper in the solution groups about when we have a project here, when we're talking about Google's potential project in this area, what does it actually mean for some of those programs to apply, what's happening to the specifics. Okay, next, I'm sorry, I can't read your name card. Yeah.
Oh, okay. My name is Norma Camacho, Santa Clara Valley Water District, and I just had some comments to think about as we're talking about transportation and bicycles and alternate modes of transportation. And I know that, in this community here, we're becoming more and more reliant on the Ubers and Lyfts of the world, and so how do they fit into this transportation network? How do they link, between different modes of transportation? I'm also seeing not only bicycle share, but all of a sudden all these scooter shares are popping up everywhere. I've seen scooters all over the place. And so how does that really fit into the community that we're trying to develop for the future? And how do they share, the roads with the bicycles and the pedestrians? And how do we develop safe routes in which they can do that in a way that's really, really coordinated? And the other thing I wanted to bring up just for us to think about in terms of transportation is, our population is getting more elderly, and how does the elderly fit into these transportation networks as well? And how do we develop things that are accessible or ADA compliant to many of the people who are on wheelchairs, et cetera, and keep them safe? And so just want us to think about those things as we dive into the more specific groups on transportation and quality of life. Thanks.
Great comment. Thank you. Glenn. Nice. think this is anyone else, does anyone else have their cards up? Oh, Shiloh will have her card up. Didn't you get a chance to talk? Just kidding.
Thank you.
Glenn?
Glenn Williams of the County of Santa Clara, and this may speak to Shiloh anyway. One more expansion on my earlier subject. One of the things that I would love to see the city of San Jose do is to perhaps think of Diridon Station as a bicycle wheel. And a bicycle wheel has a hub at the station, and it has spokes radiating out from it. If the city is planning to do a great deal to improve bicycle transportation, starting at Diridon and figuring out what the transportation spokes would be for accessing that site, and taking those, and over the next 9 years, 8 years between now and 2026, when BART opens there, you could open in 2026 with significant corridors pre-established from north, south, east, and west, that people could actually take bicycles and get themselves to the transit node. And that's not to not prioritize or not value other bicycle lanes and other bicycle opportunities elsewhere, but the city has a limited amount of resources. And if you can start with prioritizing that hub on which you can then build the interconnecting networks, I think it goes a long way towards stretching scarce dollars.
Amen, yeah. I have a question for Reginald, and I don't know too much about your organization, so I might be making some assumptions, but I'm very interested in how in this process we collectively make an attempt through some mechanism to make sure that the Shuras of the world or the tattoo parlor on San Carlos Street that's family owned and operated remains. And I'm wondering, I'm assuming from your organization that's something you guys think deeply about, and I'm wondering if you have any suggestions for us. And before you answer, I just have to put in a plug. May 10th is Bike to Work Day, so y'all should ride. Also, May is Bike Month, so please pledge to ride.
No, we didn't give deep thought to the tattoo shop. But basically what we do is try to make sure that the construction pieces are integrated, and that a lot of different new people have access to contracting. But from that, we look at small businesses all around. If we have a development in the middle of downtown that's closed, the example I used the Apple spaceship as an example, and they have all the restaurants inside, they have shoe shine guys on the inside, they have everything inside that building, then all the businesses around, the restaurants around, the cleaners around, the shoe shine, or the tattoo parlors, right? They won't, the 20,000 people come in and nobody has gotten it, no, there's no business to be spread around. So we think that the interconnectedness of the center of your city we need to consider that in this development. Not just this development, but all the developments that we're going to be doing downtown. So there should be value for the grocery store should be excited about the development. The tattoo parlor should be excited about it. 20,000 people coming into downtown, he should be excited about it as well, instead of cutting them off and not thinking about them as we set up our processes. So I think that we look forward to be almost like your bicycle wheel again. Like the development is here, but the blessings go out all over the place.
Okay, great. Anyone else? I think we're nearing the end of this part of the program. Okay, seeing none, you all can stay up there for right now. Sorry, no more questions for you, just for ease here. So we're going to move into the second part of public comment. We've gotten 3 cards. Tessa Woodmancy. Okay.
Oh, good. I guess one of the comments was about limitations and restrictions creating creativity. I think that we need to get out of our cars and get onto our bikes. And one of the things that my husband, who's a biologist, master biologist, says that we are in the jaws of destruction. Forget about being on the precipice of, climate change. We are in the jaws of destruction. So we need to make changes. And when I talk about the limitations, we need to limit our fossil fuel use. And so this is what we need to be doing. And we need to create a structure that prioritizes bicycle and pedestrian corridors. And so I've been saying that we need bike lanes on all major roads in San Jose. And what Glenn has been saying of this, the bicycle wheel, well, Stockton Avenue is definitely part of that, and that's where we're seeing how we, like even this today, because I live on Stockton, and we rode our bicycles down, and it was very, very busy because there was a shark game. So there was a lot of cars and a lot of pollution. So I've been saying we really need a tree-lined center in Stockton Avenue for nothing else, just to mitigate the pollution, because as you're riding your bike, and to slow the traffic down. And that needs to be done on all the other parts of our city as well. Like I was saying, Julian, to make it wheelchair accessible as well as bicycle safe, as well as Taylor Street. Taylor Street is a big mess. It also needs a lot from Taylor all the way to Winchester for it to be a bike lane and make it much safer, all the interactions on that street. And what other street? Taylor Street. Well, we also have a problem with the bird netting on the overpass that needs to be improved. Okay, so that was basically it, just bicycle lanes on all major roads in San Jose.
Thank you. All right, next, Roland LeBrun. And we actually, going down to 2 minutes here.
Thank you. So I actually wanted to comment on the previous item. So Mr. Wilcox, I'm publicly citing you with a violation of Government Code Section 54954.3. Now, do you understand why the Brown Act is written the way it is? Because of what I get to tell you, and unfortunately the people I'm going to talk about are no longer in the room. The presentation said a BART station has to be in the same building. Well, as Edward pointed out, something happened between the draft SEIR and the final SEIR, because the BART platforms have now moved under Santa Clara. Last time I checked, we're not building anything about Santa Clara, so that's going to have to be addressed. But the real issue is these people were not communicating. And the fact that the DOT and the VT have left the room, to me, implies they're not really interested in what you or I have to say about the subject matter. I mean, they're operating in a vacuum. That's going to have to be addressed at some point, either through a JPA or forget about these people and go straight to the joint venture between City of San Jose and Google, and let's move on. See how much time I got left. Okay. HSR business plan. Wonderful. We're electrifying to Gilroy. You know, I love it. I live near the Blossom Hill Caltrain station. But Caltrain, pay attention. You're not putting that in your business plan. And what you don't understand is all these pieces tie together. You've got to look at the entire thing, at least from Santa Clara all the way down to the south, at least to Blossom Hill, because if you don't, this is how you finish up with the 4 tracks that Harvey is so upset about. Okay, very last point. The company they're working for is called Arcadis. That company, after they were done with Rotterdam, actually did London Bridge in London. And once you go and look at what's going on in London, you're going to understand how they've addressed all these issues with displacement and everything else. Thank you very much, and I wish I had more than 2 minutes.
Thank you, Roland. Last speaker is Larry Ames, unless there are any other speaker cards.
So I thank you for the opportunity to talk at the end and to comment on tonight's topics. I echo Harvey's and Kevin's concerns. We in the community have been meeting with high-speed rail for a decade now, and the problem has been that the impact to the North Willow Glen and Gardner district. The current tracks were from the 1930s when it was quiet. It's in people's backyards and at grade. But if it's expanded into be high-speed rail, there'll be noise, there'll be tracks widen, which will take lands, it'll lose a park. And that poor neighborhood has already been impacted by the freeways 87 and 280 and San Jose Airport flying overhead. It's enough for them. There were alternative study. They looked at tunnels. That wasn't going to work, but might not work, but elevated alignment, where you'd shift the tracks over to be within the freeway right-of-way. So you wouldn't have to take any land, and the tracks would be within the sound walls, and so it'd be much quieter. That became the new preferred plan. Now we're hearing that they're going to electrify the trains to Gilroy. I'm happy for that. But if the high-speed rail blends there, the question is, will the high-speed rail be on the current track alignment? Or is there still an opportunity to have a new track built for Caltrain, the elevated electrified Caltrain within the Freeway 87-280 corridor? If you can do that, great. If you're going to go and just put 4 lanes on the existing tracks through the neighborhood, you're going to destroy that neighborhood. Also, Glenn, you mentioned how to get to the Deardown Station. Complete the Los Gatos Creek Trail. And Kathy, for you about Bird, that Bird Avenue was designed in the 1960s when they had car was king, and the trick was to get cars every place as fast as possible. They are fixing up the intersections elsewhere in the city. They've done it at San Carlos at 880 and also Tully Road at 101, where they have sharpened the corners and removed the right turns on red. You can do something like that. That would help your area a lot. So thank you for the opportunity to respond. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to Lee to conclude the meeting.
Okay, and I'm going to invite our presenters to go on back to their seats. Thank you very much. Another round of applause for them. So really quickly before we move on to the next section, a lot of great conversation. One bit of information that Edward brought up that we do have Kim in the room, our deputy city manager, kind of this cost of development conversation that came up. I wanted to have Kim provide a little bit of context and talk about the continuation of that conversation. I think how it was portrayed in the media was a little bit out of context. I just want the community to better kind of understand what exactly is happening.
Yeah, so last Tuesday, the San Jose City Council had asked for a study session, not any kind of decision-making session, just an opportunity to understand what they called the cost of development. That basically was what determines whether a housing project is feasible or not. Because I think we know we have a strong need to have more housing. We have a specific goal of having 15,000 new housing units in the next 5 years, 15,000 market rate units, and 10,000 affordable units. And there's an interdependency. We don't get the affordable unless we get the market, right? So the part 1 of that study session was done by the Urban Land Institute, and it was just basic education about what determines whether a project is feasible or not. And it was big things like land costs and construction costs and the cost of capital. And then, so city fees and taxes are one of those components. What's going to happen tomorrow at the end of the council meeting is the continuation of that study session. And it's going to be very, very interesting because Kaiser Marston is going to share their research where they looked at different geographic areas of the city and did kind of prototype projects. And you can see where housing is likely to happen or not in different parts of the city. And a lot of it is just based on where we are in the market cycle now. And it's frustrating because land costs are high and construction costs are high. But unfortunately, crazy as it seems, rents in San Jose are lower, significantly lower than they are in other places like Mountain View and Cupertino and Sunnyvale, where housing is much more attractive and feasible there, and those are the communities that aren't welcoming it as much as San Jose is. So it's an interesting and very complex conundrum, but I just want you to have that on your radar screen. It was not, should we cut fees or taxes or not? It was not to set up that conversation. It was to have sort of basic understanding. And you can see some of these forces like land costs and construction costs are just so major that the point was made, we could eliminate all fees and taxes and we're still not going to get market rate housing at this point in the cycle. So I hope that's helpful context.
Perfect.
Kim, approximately what time will
You know, that's always, you really kind of watch it. I would say my guess reading the agenda is probably not before 3:30-ish, but always best to keep an eye on it through the internet.
Thank you, Kim. So we're going to tie up the meeting, just a few next steps, and I want to start with Kathy Sutherland in Delmas Park, because Delmas Park got brought up a bunch today. We had talked earlier that Communiversity and San Jose State had been doing a kind of student-led process in the Delmas Park area, and that's going to be concluding with an event Sunday, May 6th, which is going to be the Delmas Park Community Open House and Pop-Up Park, so there will be somewhat of a temporary park, Kathy. And that is going to be at 490 West San Carlos Street. There's this flyer in the back. I encourage you all to be there. And we're going to, some of us as staff will be there as well, kind of seeing just how the pop-up kind of workshop works, because we're going to be doing several of those as a part of this process. So May 6th is that, and then May 10th is Bike to Work Day. So we're finishing up meeting number 3 here. It's going to get really, really busy here for all of us, the city team, community, and all of you relatively soon with these solution groups coming up. And I know May and June are not stressful for any of you at all with graduations, end of the school year. So we're all going to put down our heads and get through this together. Really excited by, as soon as we kind of randomly came up with this idea of TED Talks, I was really looking forward to tonight. We've been talking around kind of the issue of what's going to happen in Diridon, and there's been tension in the room. All of us kind of fearful for what may or may not happen, and I've been really kind of interested in just the word opportunity my whole life. And so, tonight we started to hear about that. We can address some of these challenges with the opportunities that come up. So hopefully those of you that are going to be going next week got really good examples. I think the 5 of you did an excellent job. Kind of, high level and all the way down to very detailed things that could happen. So remember those, because we're going to be bringing those back to the solution groups, whether it be transportation or the neighborhood quality of life stuff. And I, known many of you for a very long time that presented tonight, like Kathy, and I know you've brought up this issue time and time again, and this is the perfect forum and opportunity to address something like that. So our next meeting is going to be May 23rd. We are going to hear again from Google. I believe Michael, one of our members on the SAG, will be presenting. And that's going to be kind of down a level from what we did 3 weeks ago, where it was kind of, why San Jose, why Diridon, and start to learn more about Google's initial thinking, about the conversations we've had in this room, and kind of what they're thinking of Diridon, followed by the remainder of the TED Talks. So we're going to hear a lot about kind of the opportunities in Diridon next meeting. Followed by meeting 5, 6, 7, and 8, we're going to start to bring back the initial conversations that the solution groups heard. So we can go down a level, with the 10, 8, 12 members on those individual subjects, and then bring it back up to all of you. We don't have a date set for the July meeting, because we were hoping to not have to do one in July, because several people take vacation in July. But I do think, given kind of the flow and kind of not wanting to rush this in August, we're going to try for a July meeting. So we will send out a doodle to try and get a sense of what's going to be the best availability for everyone, because I know several of you have already said that you're going to try and plan a vacation, and if we need to do something the first week of August, we will. So that's going to be kind of the rhythm for the remainder of the summer and into early fall. Really quickly, as usual, I always put up this slide for public comments. If anyone from the public watching didn't get a chance to participate in public comment but wants their name on the record, please email Tara. One of the other things that we're going to be mentioning is the new DiridonSJ.org website is now live. And one of the things that we're going to be doing is we kind of talked about the Brown Act and how can you guys share information with one another. You're going to email it to myself, Lauren, or Tara, and there's a clearinghouse on there now. So, I know Bill has sent in information around some of the planning efforts in around Toronto and Montreal, I believe. We're going to put it up there. If any of you have reports, ideas, and you're not able to send it out to the whole group, send it to us. We're going to post it there so there's a public record of what we're all sharing with the group in the way of resources. And as we start to get information that's going to be requested from the solution groups and fill out some of more of the demographic information that we spoke about last week, that'll be uploaded there as well. And then the site's going to be used to start hosting some of the online engagement that we've talked about. So with that, I think security wants to start watching the Sharks game, man. So I see that we've got 2 questions. So why don't we start with Shiloh, and then we'll go to Bill, and then we'll close it up.
I just wanted to say thank you to staff. I'm appreciating how this process is rolling out and the fact that you're forming working groups so we can all get to know each other and talk about exciting things. So I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
And mine is a question around the solution groups. I may have missed it. You were going to get back to us about whether or not alternates could participate.
Alternates can absolutely participate. So sorry if I didn't follow up on that.
I may have missed that. Okay. My 2 solution groups are one day after the week I'm on vacation, so I'll need an alternate.
Okay. Jean?
Jean Cohen with the Building Trades. I just have a process question.
Yeah.
Some of the public comments were about whether or not people could speak on specific items. I'm not speaking to where public comment is on the agenda, but could you just illuminate the group a little bit about whether people can speak on every item that's on the agenda?
Yeah, and I would say I'm not 100% comfortable answering that because I thought the presentation on public comment on every single agenda item was somewhat vague. I know that we don't do that for some of our council committees and commissions, so I don't believe that that's necessary. I think the placement is important, obviously, mentioning that, and then trying to ensure the very beginning of this, knowing that it's going to be very process heavy, focusing on you guys more to set up the process so that we can build in more of the public comment through the other avenues. But that's something I can bring back to the group on the 23rd, but I don't believe that it is a Brown Act violation. Okay, with that, we are adjourned for the night. Thank you very much.